money is below several things on the list of what's most important when it comes to motivation. And the top two things that motivate people, especially in the workplace, are feeling trusted and autonomy. Leyah, welcome back to the podcast. How are you this afternoon?
Thank you. Very good. I appreciate being back again.
Absolutely. It's been too long. So Leyah is our rockstar director of customer success and is doing fantastic work with a lot of folks, specifically and primarily in our Systematize Your Construction Business program. So you have your wealth of knowledge and experience when it comes to training and development. You've worked with some large national home builders. And so in a way, you could say getting people to do stuff is a topic you've spent a lot of time on. So we're going to end up talking about how can you get your team to implement processes? How can you get your team to implement meaningful change? This is a big problem that we hear. It's a big hurdle that stands between where people are and where they want to be. So we're going to talk about some of those myths and some really practical ways to do that. But we'll zoom out a couple of frames and start by talking about employee engagement, because this is probably, I guess one way to say it is if you have poor employee engagement, if you don't solve the employee engagement problem, it doesn't really matter, because if they're disengaged, they're not going to follow any process. They're not going to implement any process. And maybe more importantly, if they're that disengaged, you just may not have a team to follow processes. You may just find yourself being a one-man or a one-woman show in the not-too-distant future. So let's talk about employee engagement. Before we hit record, I found, just Googled employee engagement, found a study with some pretty interesting and alarming statistics. So I'll kick this off and then we can talk about what we can do about it. This is according to a Gallup study, Gallup's State of the Global Workplace study, only 15% of employees are engaged in the workplace. 85% are disengaged. 73% of employees are considering leaving their jobs. Here's a big one. At the macro scale, low employee engagement costs companies $450 billion per year, up to $500 billion per year. Disengaged workers take less responsibility and ownership of their attitude, behavior, and they drain overall productivity. Yeah, so this is a big problem. So Leyah, let's talk about this. Why aren't people engaged at work? Why do you think 85% of people are disengaged at work?
Oh, goodness. There's probably a myriad of answers. Some of the things that I have seen, both in working with some of our SYCB clients, as well as just having been in training and development for a while, is people don't understand why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is if we can educate our team, educate our employees as to why we're doing something and make them a part of it, then they're much more likely to do it. When something is just simply dictated, it's not that exciting to anyone. No one wants to have something dictated and told what to do and micromanaged all the way along the way. It's human nature to not want to engage with something like that. And so whether or not someone is intentionally being disengaged, is that a word? Whether someone's intentionally disengaging with you or not, there's a part of human psyche that doesn't want to do that if they're being told what they need to do without a reason why, or aren't being involved in how that can come about.
Yeah. And I would probably, if somebody asked me, why are, Todd, in your experience in corporate America of big companies, if I had to boil it down to two words, why people are disengaged, the first two words that come to mind would be chicken shit leadership.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
Chicken shit leaders. And actually, that's kind of a paradox. They're not leaders. They're managers.
Exactly.
And it's maybe another way to say it is that there's just a lack of leadership. People aren't being led. They're being managed, micromanaged in a lot of cases, but they're not being led. And I've spent time inside Fortune 50 companies with tens of thousands of employees, companies with hundreds of employees and companies with a handful of employees. And I've seen a lot of bad leadership. In fact, it's pretty rare to see good leadership. It's rare to see good management, unfortunately. But I can think about some people, situations I was in that made it hard to be engaged. One story I've told several times in the past few months was working for one of these large international companies, and the big senior executive international intergalactic vice president came down from headquarters for an all hands meeting, and there were 75 or 100 of us in this auditorium, and he laid out the vision for the company and all the great things the company was going to do and all of this sort of stuff. And I went to my boss on the local level a couple of days later. I was like, man, this is great. That was great. That stuff that Charlie was talking about. What can I do to help? What can I do to be part of that? My boss, Jeff, was like, I don't know. I don't know. Just, I don't know. And what a depressing answer. Because there was this great vision that was being cast, and there was no way for me to be part of it. Not only were they not telling me, hey, Todd, here's what you can do, but when I asked what I could do to be part of it, the answer was, I don't know. Yeah. So it's this lack of vision. And then when there is a vision that's being cast, not being able to answer the question, how can I be part of that? How can I connect to that? I think is a problem. And that reminds me, I was spending some time with one of our clients in the last couple of years, and the owner started sharing about the vision for the company. And one of the people on his team who'd been there a long time was like visibly agitated and got annoyed about the vision. Why is that the vision? Why are you doing that? Because there was this disconnect. And it was because it wasn't really a good vision. It wasn't the vision. So it's a big deal. The vision is a big deal. And people don't just want paychecks. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. So you've spent some time in big companies, right? Have you had an experience like that where either the chicken shit leadership or the lack of vision or the disconnect to the vision has been an issue for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually been really fortunate, I guess, in both regards to have chicken shit leadership as well as really excellent leadership. And so have been able to see how that can either fall apart if there's really terrible leadership and that is not relayed down to the individual to understand why and what their part is in that to move forward, versus having a really excellent leader who has a very clear vision and has a plan, and everyone understands what their purpose and meaning is in that plan. I'm sure you can guess the outcomes of both of those. When there was no vision, there was no direction. Nobody knew why we were doing what we're doing. There was no purpose. Things were chaotic. It was frustrating. For those of us who were just naturally high performers, it was extremely frustrating because you just felt like you were spinning your wheels every day and getting nowhere. For those who didn't naturally have that, they just kind of sat back and coasted, but certainly didn't feel good about themselves at the end of the day. And on the flip side, with really great leadership and really great vision and great purpose, I knew what my purpose was every day. I knew what I had to do every day. I was empowered to do what I needed to do every day, and I was trusted to do it. And then I was recognized for it at the end of the day as well, which all of those things, there's so many components to leadership and good leadership. It's not just one thing. It's many things. But, as you talk about this, having great leadership, having a good vision, and then helping people to understand what their part is in that will help employees to be engaged and they'll want to be a part of what you're doing. They'll want to be a part of that vision versus not. So I guess the question is, especially for construction business owners, is how do you relay that vision? How do you engage your team? How do you implement some of these things that you're doing to create the vision that you have? And that's really, I think, what we're going to talk about today. Yeah.
So I have one specific, pretty simple strategy about articulating the vision that we'll talk about in a minute, but let's talk about improving engagement. Mm-hmm. What are some before we get into the practical stuff, what are people really looking for? For the business owners, many of whom have never been an employee. It's been decades since they've been an employee, or maybe, like, if they're being honest, when they were employees, they were terrible employees, and that's why they're business owners. That's why they're entrepreneurs, which is okay. But let's look at it from the team members' standpoint, from the employee standpoint. What are they looking for that will improve their engagement? Then we can talk about some practical stuff.
Yeah, of course. So I think employees are looking for a lot of things. I think this is really just human nature to want some of these things. Purpose is number one. We all want to have purpose, especially when we're spending the majority of our time at a place of employment. It's really nice to know what that purpose is and to be a part of it. We want growth. We want to have life that provides balance. I actually like to use the word harmony over balance when we're talking about that. And then, of course, we all want connection, community, and belonging. And if we can create that at our workplace, we're certainly a step ahead, and the people who are there are going to be much more engaged than if they're not.
Community. Let's talk about that. Some people might think, we work together 8 to 10 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. I think we're pretty good on community, but is there more to it than just being in the same office? Is there more to that community than just being in an office or being on a job site together every day? What do you think?
Absolutely. I think it's really easy to fall into a routine, if you will, of it just being another person that's there. But the reality is it's another human, and every one of us comes with something. And so taking the time, especially as a leader, to really get to know your people, to get to know them on, in a respectful but personal way, to know who they are, what's going on in their life and in their world, and being empathetic to that. And I believe I call it a universal language, but appreciation goes a long way. So as you are leading your team, you want to, and you say this a lot, Todd, you want to catch them doing the right things. You want to catch them and then recognize them for that. It's not just like observing quietly and being like, oh, cool, they finally did what I asked them to do. No. You got to go and you got to say, hey, Todd, thank you so much for getting this report done on time. This looks awesome. Like, give that appreciation. People need to hear it. And quite frankly, that goes such a long way. Most people are fine with a simple word of appreciation and praise, far more than any big accolades or awards. Those always feel nice too, but just that simple, genuine appreciation is really huge.
Yeah, that is so lacking in the construction industry. Mm-hmm. It's like, we have a lot of us have the auditor mentality where all we see are the deficiencies. We never see what's going well. And there was a guy I worked for. He said these words in really angry voice. Like, we don't need to be talking about what's going right around here. We need to be talking about what's going wrong. Like, wow. Sign me up for that. Yeah, let's have a 4-hour session about that, which we did. We had a few of those, and that was his MO. As you might not be surprised to find out, employee engagement was pretty low in that environment. Yeah, recognition's huge. A little bit of recognition goes a long way. And you said something that I think some people think is a compliment, but it's really a backhanded compliment. And it's one of the worst things you can do. So when somebody, let's say you're trying to get your superintendent to file their daily log, right? And they do it. After 4 years, they finally send in their daily log, and it's mostly right. Some people would think a compliment is, hey, Dave, thanks for finally getting it right. Thanks for finally getting your head out of your ass and doing it right. Ha ha. And you know what? They finally did it. And what seems like a joke or a backhanded compliment is probably the worst thing you can do. It's so demotivating. But it would be so simple to say, hey, this was great. Thanks so much for doing this. This is important because XYZ, this is really going to help. I really liked the way you did this. This picture was incredible, so helpful. Just a little bit of that recognition goes such a long way. Yeah, I like that.
Well, I think people, can I add on to that really quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
People play for points. It's part of life. And if you're doing something and you're getting the praise from it, whether or not you're consciously seeking that out, it just feels good. And if every time you do something, you're getting that positive reinforcement, you're going to do it versus not. So you didn't fill it out for 2 or 3 years or even a couple of days, and you finally do, and that's what you're met with. Why would you do it again? We need to be very cognizant of the way that we're approaching things. And I think to your point in construction, it's a different culture all the way around. And a lot of times it is met with razzing and with joking, and that's part of the culture, and that's fun. But as a leader, we need to be cognizant of the way that we're engaging with our people and what is the culture and what is the environment that you're creating? What's part of your vision? And are you leaning into that, or are you pushing against it?
Yeah. So when it comes to purpose, this is a question that I've spent a lot of time talking to people about. How do I share my purpose? How do I articulate my vision? How do I get my team on board with the vision? And there's a really simple way to do this. And it may come across as a little touchy-feely, but a really simple way to do this is to think about a story of impact, right? So one of the stories that I share is I had a conversation with a lady several months ago, and she had just come to work for one of our clients, and we'll call her Sarah. And got on the Zoom call with Sarah. First time we'd ever spoken. She was in a new job, didn't really know much about her situation. And she started crying when I asked her a question. And I was like, okay, what have we done here? And the question was, what are your goals? What would you like to accomplish? And the short version of it was that in her previous role, the owner and the owners, well, it was a husband and wife team. So the owners were so oppressive. They required her to work 12 hours a day, expected her to respond to emails with very short notice, late at night. She didn't feel like she could get away from her machine at all during the day. She was working until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. She was stressed and overwhelmed. And she finally worked up the courage to say, hey, I need help. I'm overwhelmed. And they responded with, toughen up, work harder, or find another job, basically. And fortunately, she did. And she went to work for one of our clients who had just gone through the exercise of designing their accountability chart and determined, hey, growth is not bad. It's good. It would be good to grow the company and bring more people on. And as a result, she was able to get out of her old job, come to work for a great environment in a great process. But she was so traumatized by her past job that just asking her about it made her upset. So that's a story of impact, because her new boss decided to grow the company, and they went through the effort of designing their accountability chart, figuring out where they want to go, and then growing the business to the point where it created an opportunity for her. It allowed her to get out of that environment into a much better environment. So part of their purpose was, we grow the company and we can have an impact on more people. So that story of impact is a really good way to articulate your vision, articulate why you're doing something. You talked about purpose. I think people want to know, they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to have purpose. We all do. We're not just here. We just don't want to do the same thing day in and day out and not be part of something. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. So a great way to articulate your purpose is to just think about somebody you've had a positive impact on, that your company has had a positive impact on. Could be a customer, trade partner, maybe an employee, maybe a philanthropy, a community group that you support, that answers the question, why are we doing this? What's our purpose? And then just share that story. So another story that I love, a story of impact, is with one of our clients. And when I asked him about this, he asked him about a story of impact. He said, yeah, there's a guy named Kent Hooper. And I was at a restaurant one day and I saw Kent Hooper walking toward me, and I thought, oh boy. And he thought that because he had done a project for Mr. Hooper, and didn't end all that smoothly. Things were a little bumpy toward the end, and I don't think it went to litigation, but it wasn't exactly a smooth landing. So our guy thought, here comes Mr. Hooper. This is going to be ugly. But so when he stood up to greet Mr. Hooper and shake his hand, Ken Hooper gave him a big hug. And this was a surprise. And Mr. Hooper went on to say, like, thank you so much for what you did for our house, by remodeling our house or building a new house, whichever it was. You've changed our family's life because our disabled daughter can now get around the house. It's completely changed her life. She can do things for herself that were impossible before. She can maneuver through the house on her own, and it's really improved the quality of her life and our life as a family. So he was very impacted. And so sharing that story of impact required a few Kleenexes at times, but it also it answered the question, why are we doing this? What's our purpose? So that's, if you're wondering, how can I do that? Then just find a story of impact and share it with your team.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Todd, what I like about that is that's a story, and people connect emotionally to stories. And once someone is connected to something emotionally, they're more invested. So if your team can understand your purpose and your vision and can be emotionally tied to it, then they're going to be on board with you. And what I think is also kind of the next step of that is you as the leader, you own the vision, but engage your team in how you deliver that vision. You don't have to have all the answers. That's where that micromanaging comes into place and people disengage. They're no longer part of the purpose. But if you can say, this is the vision, how are we going to get there? And you let your team help you make that decision. They are fully engaged. They're part of it. They now have a purpose too. And there's ownership. There's empowerment. And that is where things really start to shift for your employees and for your team.
Yeah, that reminds me of a conversation I had with Leyah Valgardson. He's a real estate developer in Texas who was on the podcast sometime in the past year. And he basically described his role as the CEO. He said something to the effect of, my job is to go out in the future, 5 years in the future, and plant a flag and say, this is where we're going. This is why we're going here. This is the vision and direction of the company. And then my job is to get the team on board and get them fired up about the vision and then let them figure out how we get there. I think this is where a lot of people miss it. They think, I have to just tell people what to do, but I don't really tell them about the vision, or I tell them the vision and then I have to tell them everything to do. And that just doesn't work. That's the micromanagement thing. Yeah. All right. So now we've talked about employee engagement, what we need to do to improve engagement, that we can improve engagement. And so here's an interesting little thought. You may look at those stats. 85% of people are disengaged. 73% of employees are considering leaving their jobs. There's two ways to look at that. A more positive, maybe helpful way to look at that is to think, oh, good. 73% of the employees at my competitors are thinking about leaving their job. I just need to get in front of them. And all they need to do is know about us. And when they hear our vision, they hear our story, they see what we're doing, they'll probably want to come to work for us. So it's good news. Those stats, as dismal as they may be, can be good news, depending on how you look at it. So let's talk about the question of how do we get people to embrace new processes, right? How do you get people to change? There are a few misconceptions that I've found. One thing I hear a lot is, frankly, people think it's impossible to implement meaningful change in the business, that people don't want to change. Can't teach an old dog new tricks, pick your euphemism for that, but people just don't want to change. And here's what I found is people don't want to change for your reasons, but people will change for their own reasons. It's people have all the I read something in a book called Instant Influence by Dr. Michael Pantalon. Fascinating book, kind of a corny name, but this guy's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I can never remember. And he was tasked with coming up with a program that could be used by emergency room doctors who had 8 minutes or less to convince people with a substance abuse problem to change their life. That was his task. So he studied human motivation. And if you think about a type of person who is least likely to change, it's somebody who's addicted. They have a substance abuse problem. So what he said, made a couple of statements that one of which stuck with me is that people have all the motivation they need. And if you approach it with that posture, people have all the motivation they need. They don't need your motivation. Your job as a leader is to help them find their motivation. Cheers. Instead of, if you think, I have to motivate these people, you're going to go about it all wrong. So people have all the motivation they need. And the other statement he made was, people change when they hear themselves say what's in it for them. People change when they hear themselves say what's in it for them or why they want to. People don't change when they hear you say why you want to, or people don't change when they hear you say why they should want to. People change when they hear themselves say why they want to. So those two statements really changed the way I thought about influencing people and getting people to do what they want to. It's not your job to get people to do something they don't want to. So you have to, I think the key, one of the secrets to influence, if you want to call it that, is to understand that people change for their own reasons. People change for their motivation, and your job is to help them find their own motivation. And then the other thing I've heard a lot, and you've probably heard the same thing, we talk a lot about creating processes and systems and getting people to follow and implement systems. And I've heard dozens of people say, yeah, I have documented all of these processes, but nobody follows them. Or, yeah, we have 3-ring binders of SOPs, but nobody follows them. Or, I created a great process for this, but nobody uses it. Have you heard this as well?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So
there's a common thing in all of that.
There's a common thing. There's a common pronoun. It's I. And so here's what I found, and I learned this the hard way. I wish I had learned this 15 years sooner in my career. But what I found is that it's not about the process. It's not about the what you create. What's most important is how the process is developed, or maybe even a better way to say it is who is involved in developing the process is more important than the process itself. Mm-hmm. So, as I like to say, your team will run through walls to follow a process or plan that they're part of, but they will find every reason your plan won't work. So
very true.
It's really about who is involved in the process more than the process itself. Let's go back and talk about one. People don't want to change, right? So one of the misconceptions or the concerns we hear from people that we work with would be, I think it was Neil, who said, as he went into this process, he was like, I'm going to design this process with my team. We're going to get in here with a bunch of Post-it notes. And he said he was concerned, like, are they going to make fun of this? Are they going to think it's stupid? Are they going to resist it? What's been your experience? What have you heard from clients who have developed processes the right way with their team? What's been some of the feedback about how their team responded?
Yeah, so through the SYCB program, one of the sections that we spend the most time on is the nail the handoff. And specifically, we guide our clients to pull their team together and to give them good direction, but then let their team decide what is the process. What does it look like? And not what is it right now, but in an ideal situation, what is this process? And many of them go into that feeling a little apprehensive, a little nervous. Maybe they've never done something like this. I've even had some of them say, well, can't I just do this on my own? And, of course, we guide them. No, you can't. You've got to engage your team. You need to pull everyone together. Well, who needs to be in the room? Can it just be me and so? No, pull your whole team together. Anyone who might touch this process should be in that room. And again, like I said, they sometimes go in a little nervous and apprehensive, but something magical happens when they pull their team together and they give them good instructions as to what it is that they're doing, what the purpose of that meeting is, what their task is, and then say, all right, let's design this. and they're pulling people out. Sometimes they have to actually call them by name and say, what do you think? What would be the next step here? What would be ideal here? But by the end of this process, their whole team is excited. Many people come back to the next group call or one-on-one call that I have with our clients saying they never expected their team to be so excited about something like this or to be so engaged. Or I'm getting these phone calls and emails from my team saying, what else can I do to help with this? How else can I develop this? When is this going to be rolled out? There's just this excitement and this level of engagement that they hadn't seen in a long time, if ever, with their team. And it's because I think there's so many factors, which I'm sure we'll talk about right now, Todd, but first and foremost, they created the vision. They explained what it is that they're doing, and then they empowered their team and involved their team and wanted to know what they had to say. Because at the end of the day, you hired these people because they're the experts at what they do, right? You can't do everything in your business as much as maybe you'd like to. It's impossible. So why not engage the people who know their jobs best? Ask them what would make the most sense. How is this going to be the most ideal process for us? And a few things can happen in that situation. Not only are you empowering your team and you're asking them and you're helping them to be a part of the why and the vision, right? They're now a part of that. They're creating it. But there's also this community factor. And many of our clients, they'd never pulled their team together ever. This is the first time their whole team had been in a room together. And so they're not only getting to know each other a little bit more personally, they're understanding why this person does the things that they do in their job and why it might take a little bit of time beyond what they maybe would want on this other end. There's just this understanding of what everyone's doing and this camaraderie and this community and this ability to see how they play a part in a bigger picture. And then, of course, when you are involved in creating something, you own it. You're excited about it. You have a sense of pride for it. So at the very end of this SYCB program, when I go back and I ask them, what was the most impactful thing through this whole program? We've provided you a lot of great content, a lot of technical training, a lot of really good motivation. And almost every single one says it was nail the handoff. It was the this is how we do it process with my team. That's when things really started to change. Because again, as I said, there's this excitement and this momentum that happens throughout the whole team, and it just infuses into every other part of their business going forward.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that surprise people going into that. One is the value of getting people together and working on a problem together as a group, that community component. The other thing that surprises people is that their team wants to change. They're dealing with frustration. They're dealing with chaos. They're dealing with duplicated efforts and the stress. It's tough on people, and they want to change. They want life to be simpler. They want to be more productive. They want to be more efficient. They see the inefficiencies. They see the mistakes. They see the things that aren't going well. They're dealing with the tough customer conversations like, hey, what's going on here? I thought, this doesn't seem right. Like, crap. We dropped the ball. So they're dealing with it, and they want to change. They are motivated. They have a lot of motivation to change and eliminate that chaos. So not only are they not opposed to this, not only are they just neutral, like, whatever, here comes another process. They're actually excited about it when it's done in the right way, which that surprises, it continues to surprise me because, it just continues to surprise me, but it really is incredibly powerful. So let's talk about the other thing that surprises people, which is once they go through this process, they realize, all right, the team sort of has built momentum, and the implementation sort of drives itself. Mm-hmm. It's like this wave that they can ride instead of this rope that they're trying to push up a hill, which I think is how a lot of people think about implementation, is like pushing ropes and herding cats and that sort of thing. But once you do like what Levi Benkert said, which is we're going to go out in the future, plant the flag, clearly articulate, this is where we're going. This is our purpose. This is why we're doing it. Get the team together. All right, team, what do we need to do? How are we going to get there? What problems do we need to solve first? Then the team really takes the team there. And your job is to just lead and really shepherd that team. And what people have found is the momentum sort of takes care of itself, and implementation can become much, much simpler than it has been in the past. Yeah. Have you seen, what have you seen when it comes to that?
Well, I think one thing you said right at the end is important. You said when it's done the right way.
Yeah.
So there's two ways that this can, well, probably more than two ways, but two ways that I've seen this happen at the end of a team session with Nail the Handoff. One, there's always that excitement and that engagement with the team. And what can happen is, as the leader, they either kind of hold those cards close and they're holding onto them tight and thinking they have to now be responsible for all the implementation, and they get overwhelmed, they get busy, and guess what? Implementation doesn't happen, and the excitement from the team dwindles, and also the trust dwindles because, they're like, you pulled us all together, you got us excited about this thing, and now it's been months and nothing's happened. So there's outcome number one, not done the right way. Outcome number two is when you continue to engage your team, you continue to empower your team. And like you said, you plant that stake in the ground and then you say, what are we going to do? How are we going to get there? Now, one of the tools that we provide is it's an implementation plan. It's figuring out what are all the steps that we need to do to make this happen and get it going forward. The teams that do the best are when the CEO or the business owner, their name is not on that list, hardly at all, because they're engaging their team. They are delegating to their team. They're empowering their team. They're saying, hey, how are we going to get there? What are we going to do? And there's a few things there's a few reasons why that works really well. Number one, you are trying to step out of your business. You're trying to work on your business and not in it. So by stepping away, delegating, and empowering your team, you're freeing up so much more of your time to work on that business. That's a benefit to you. Benefit to your team is they're empowered. They know you trust them. You're continuing to have that open communication and hitting deadlines. It's not that you're not involved, but you're not responsible for the day-to-day tasks. You're not responsible for the details of getting that implemented and rolled out. You're overseeing it. And that gives them that confidence. There we go. That gives them the confidence and the empowerment of they can do what they are tasked to do, and they are the experts in what you hired them to do. They feel really good about that. So that momentum continues. Like you said, it's just this wave that rolls through. But again, if it's done the right way, so you as a leader need to extend that trust and then let some things go. And when that is done well, it does. It just builds on that. Your team is engaged. They're excited. They enjoy their job a lot more. Things just seem to roll out in a way that works really well for you and your business.
Yeah. Yeah, trust is a big deal. I did some research on this a few years ago, and I was trying to figure out how important is compensation to motivation, and found some interesting research that money is below several things on the list of what's most important when it comes to motivation. What motivates people, and the top two things that motivate people, especially in the workplace, are trust, feeling trusted, and autonomy. When people feel trusted and when they have autonomy, when they're in control of their destiny and control of how they go about their day-to-day activities, it's incredibly motivating. So when you think about this process of getting the team together and saying, all right, you guys have lots of great ideas. We're going to put this together. I need your help doing this. The implicit message is, I trust you. Mm-hmm. And then there's also autonomy. Hey, we just need to solve the problem, and you guys need to figure out how you want to solve these problems. That's autonomy. And it's incredibly motivating to people. So it's incredibly liberating for folks to make that switch and realize, okay, when I trust my people and I let go of things and I give away autonomy and I give up control, it's incredibly liberating. Things get better. Mistakes go down, results get better, problems get solved faster. So it's this secret of leadership is that it actually gets easier. You can actually have less stress by growing your team, less stress by delegating better. It's in everybody's best interest for you to give up control and trust your people. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some practical tips. We've talked about a few things. If you want to articulate your purpose or your mission, then tell stories of impact. What's a practical tip that you can share to improve implementation or employee engagement?
I think along with that is you got to live the same thing that you're preaching. It's easy to maybe tell a story and to maybe express values of things that you think are important. But if everybody's watching and if you aren't living those same things, it's really hard to follow someone who is only speaking, has great lip service, but isn't actually putting things into practice. So I think it's important to be really intentional too about the story that you're telling, the vision that you're creating, and the words that you're speaking, and how you're engaging. Like what are your actions saying as well? I think that is a really easy way to lose people, is to do the big rah-rah, kind of like what you experienced in that story that you shared with your past experience, where there was this very cool vision that got you excited about it, but nothing came of it. Or, I've heard situations from people who they have that same thing where there's the big rah-rah, let's do this, we're all a big team, but then they don't actually engage in a team situation. There's a disconnect. So I think having integrity in the way that you lead, not only in the words that you say, but also in the way that you actually perform. I think that's very important as a leader, because people will follow that. They won't follow words, even though words are really powerful, but they need to be backed up with action.
Yeah.
So that's one way.
Consistency needs to be there. So if you have a problem that you need to solve, then get the team together. Resist the urge to do this and go into your fortress of solitude, flip open the laptop and start hammering out a process like you've done years in the past, over and over and over. It's not going to work. And so if you have a problem that needs to be solved, get the team together. Get the people closest to the problem, the people who will actually be implementing whatever process you come up with. Get them together. As I heard, interviewed a CEO of a big company in the Southeast. He said something that stuck with me. Every pair of hands comes with a free brain.
I like that.
Yeah. So people are smart. The people who are dealing with the problems every day, they know those problems and they probably have some solutions. So find the people closest to the problem, get them together, have a conversation, and get them talking about how to solve those problems. You don't have to solve all the problems. Your job is really to lead that conversation and facilitate. All right. So good stuff. Any other practical tips, Leyah, that we can give people either to help with employee engagement or implementing new processes? Anything else come to mind?
Well, I think we're answering the same problem in one. When people feel that they have a purpose and they are empowered, and most employees want to have a sense of community. Again, going back to the fact that we're spending the majority of our time in a workplace with the people that we work with, people want to feel like they're connected there. In fact, in one poll, it says 72% of employees say it's important to feel part of a community. And so when you're gathering your team together, that helps them to feel valued. That helps them to feel as though they're contributing to something, that they have a purpose, and now they're working together in a community. So you're kind of answering a lot of things that are going to help your employees feel fulfilled, which will help them to feel engaged, which will help with the implementation. It really just all rolls together into one.
Yeah. Yep. Good stuff. All right, folks. So if you want some detailed resources on how to nail the handoff, we've used that term a few times, then the best place to go is to the webinar, Get Out of Your Business and How to Make It Run Without You this year. And you can watch that webinar over at constructionleadingedge.com/get out, GETOUT, and learn more about a few things that'll help you get out of your business. And if you want to recession-proof your business, if you're concerned maybe things are starting to soften up and it might be time to recession-proof your business, there's a webinar out there for that as well called Recession-Proof Your Business.
Aptly named.
Aptly named. You might notice, like, wow, these names are maybe more clear than clever. So not great at naming stuff. I'm not a fancy program namer, so it's Recession-Proof Your Business. You can watch that webinar over at constructionleadingedge.com/recession. So Leyah, thanks so much for taking the time to be on here, and thanks for all the work you're doing with our clients. Love to hear their results and the impact you're having on those folks. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.